It is day 2 here at the Indiana Convention Center. The NFL Combine is going full force as we welcome you into the Take the North podcast along with Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune, who is also obviously here at the NFL Combine. I am Mark Grote of Chicago Sports Radio 670 The Score. Adam Studzinski, the producer of Take the North, back in our downtown Chicago studios. Dan and I are, again, we'd like to always give you the indication of where things are happening here. I am down in the main interview area, the radio and TV row. I've been separated from Dan today because there are many miles to walk and to take care of while we're out here. Dan, where are you? You look like you're in one of the big hallways right now.
I was just going to say that, like, it's funny. Yesterday we were about 20 feet from each other. Now I'm on a whole different floor of the convention center in a whole different pocket. I'm upstairs here on floor 2. You see this beautiful plant behind me. I felt like that was a great backdrop for today. But this is the Combine, right? You never know which direction it's going to pull you in. And I was talking with someone earlier today and saying that there's really no wrong way to eat a Reese's, right? Like there's a lot of different ways to experience the Combine, and today I just kind of did the wander and loiter thing, and have had some good success running into some people today, and that's what makes this fun, because sometimes it's just a surprise chance encounter with somebody that unearths a little bit of intel for you that is very helpful.
I'm very jealous. I was just thinking about that as I got set up where I am right now to do the podcast as we're doing it. I realized I have not had that luxury as of yet to do the thing where, like, I haven't had like a good block, an hour to myself yet out here at the Combine. So hopefully I can accomplish that very soon, because Dan is right. It's you know what it is here, Dan? It's choose your own adventure. That's what the Combine is. Now, I have specific things that I have to do for the Score, so that's why I haven't had time. But you're right. When you have time, I mean, just to give people an idea of the atmosphere here, I don't think this is wrong to say, Dan, anybody can be anywhere in these hallways as it pertains to the National Football League.
I'm going to say this in a way that hopefully does not give away the covert nature of all this, but I ran into somebody from my football pass who was on his way to the men's room this afternoon in one of the hallways over in a hotel. And we stopped and talked for 25 minutes. And this person was very, very determined to give me a very promising scouting report on what Eric Bieniemy will bring to Haugh. So it was really interesting to kind of just randomly happen upon that information and hear from somebody from EB's past who feels really, really strongly that his detailed nature and willingness to push the guys in his room is going to help the Bears offense reach a new level. It's the little things, right? And so you're talking about one little addition to one little position room. But when you hear Ben Johnson share his big picture vision for all these things, you understand why every little thing matters. And so that was kind of cool to get somebody giving that endorsement today.
Let's talk about Ben Johnson more, because he has been everywhere at this Combine. He's honestly, as far as like the coaches are concerned, he's one of the stars of the Combine this year, because he was the most sought after coach in the offseason. He lands with the Chicago Bears, a big market. Here's the question so I was on the Score, and they were talking about how, man, Ben, this is the first coach I could remember that loves to talk, and he sounds good, and he's got command of the room. And I countered with, well, no, what about Matt Nagy?
Yeah, no doubt.
Matt Nagy, probably more gregarious, probably more personality. Now, so I guess the reason I bring it up is, Dan, what is different so far about these two guys? What is different about Ben Johnson and Matt Nagy? Nagy obviously came from the offensive background, great personality, seemed to be a player's coach. So what's different? I'll give you my answer, but I want to hear what you have to say about the distinguishing between these two in that regard.
Well, also don't forget, in 2015, John Fox arrived in town with tons of personality. Now, he never really wanted to show that behind a microphone or at a podium. He kind of saved that for other opportunities, and probably saved it too much.
Unless we're talking about a monkey, right? Then we're
right. Late in his career, when he was like 3 weeks from getting fired, he finally started to let you in on some fun. But there's always this level of optimism when there's a new coach. Everything feels different all of a sudden, and there's this boost of energy. I think when you're talking about the comparison between Ben Johnson and Matt Nagy, the biggest thing that's different is Ben Johnson was the play caller for an offense that scored 68 touchdowns last regular season. He's proven as a play caller. He's got the respect around the league as a guy. Someone I ran into yesterday said, look, like, as a chess player, there may be no one better at understanding how to exploit a defense's weaknesses and really use his talent to create advantages and edges. And so those things are real with Ben Johnson. The other part of this equation is like, look, like Adam Gase came to Chicago in 2015 with John Fox after having had similar success with an offense in Denver and Peyton Manning and turning the scoreboard on its side and, having that pinball nature to how quickly they could put up points. And then when Adam Gase got his opportunity to be a head coach, it didn't go so well in Miami and New York. And so I bring that up because it's just it's a big job. And Ben Johnson, I think, understands it's a big job, but no one knows, not you, not me, not the Bears, not Ben Johnson, whether he's going to be a successful head coach, because so much of this is about managing people. It's about troubleshooting issues when they arise. It's about, I've talked about this before, it's about being both a fireman and a fire marshal, somebody that can put out a fire when it suddenly occurs, and then somebody else who can also make sure that those fires don't start to begin with, because you're making sure everything around your building is aligned. And so, as the energy and the enthusiasm around Ben kind of mushrooms and will continue to mushroom all the way through August, we just got to remember he's never done this before, and so we have to wait for some of these things to play out to know how good he is at certain parts of this job.
Yeah, no, that was a point. I try to use that caveat all the time. I feel silly, Dan, saying at this point, man, I think that Ben Johnson's going to be a really good head coach. I mean, that's almost a naive thing to say for those of us who have covered the team and those of you who have observed and evaluated this team and have are fans of this team. You do have to walk with some caution when it comes to Ben Johnson, despite how great he sounds so far. Here's the difference for me with Matt Nagy and Ben Johnson. You're right. The biggest thing you mentioned, and that is that Ben Johnson actually called plays and was responsible for at a high level for a winning team. I mean, that is a big deal. The other thing, though, with Matt Nagy was that, to me, it's simple. Matt Nagy had an offense that he was giving to Mitch Trubisky, which was basically Andy Reid's offense. And there was very little gray area until it was too late for Mitch Trubisky. And we know that Ben Johnson at least comes in saying that this will all be about the talent that is on the field, specifically the man that will be throwing the football wearing jersey number 13, Caleb Williams.
Well, that's it. And so there's a couple things here. First of all, I like the road sign you put up for us first, and then hopefully for our audience, walk with caution. That's a good sign to put on the side of the road here for the next 6 months as we kind of, explore this new world that the Bears are journeying into. I thought it was notable that we got some intel yesterday on the quarterback, because, again, as you and I talked about on the last episode, there's going to be so much attention paid to free agency in the next couple of weeks, and then the focus will pivot to the draft. We got to remember that every single thing the Bears do this offseason has to have Caleb Williams in mind. What is going to help Caleb Williams be at his best as soon as possible? And they've got to come up with that plan. I do think that it was notable to hear Ryan Poles yesterday refer to the offensive coaching staff as quote unquote juiced up, because their imagination has been stimulated by the talent they have to work with and their ability to get their hands on Caleb Williams and try to bring him to places that he couldn't get to in his rookie season. And so that's exciting for a new staff to try to get that unlocked. To do so, you've got to put pieces around him, particularly up front. That's got to start there. And then you've got to figure out, as you mentioned, like how to redevise this offense. And so previously I mentioned the person I ran into today outside of the men's room. He said, look, like the first thing Ben Johnson has to realize is that he can't bring all of the Pro Bowlers with him from Detroit, and so like if you start to get this feeling like you have arrived as a coach and everything you do is going to turn to gold, you can be humbled pretty quickly when you don't have the same pieces to work with. And so like that's the first thing is making sure you maximize the pieces you've been given, and then obviously certainly build an offense around the guys that are there. And look, I think you would agree with this. The Bears aren't in a traditional reboot mode. There's enough talent on that offense. It doesn't look like a 5-12 football team's offense usually looks like. And so hopefully they can add to that and then really hit the ground running when it's time.
Yeah, no, and I feel like quietly, not like last year where the Bears were loudly expected to be in the postseason, very quietly, people, there are, do you feel those expectations, Dan? And maybe it's not fair, but I feel like there's an expectation for the Bears to be right where we thought they were going to be this past season.
Right. No, 100%. That has to be the expectation, and like so that's new in Ben Johnson's world as well. And look, like he lived some of this in Detroit the last couple of years, but expectations get heavy, and expectations can kind of rattle you when you're not up to speed with the timetable that everyone else thinks you should be on. And so like it can push you off course if you're not prepared to see the process through, and so that's what's going to be really fascinating. And again, I think we talked about this yesterday, that Ben's promise to use the spring as this very like basic building block program, right? Like fundamentals and basics all through the spring are going to be at the forefront of everything that needs to happen at the earliest stages of his tenure. And that stuff gets boring, it gets mundane, and you have to just really embrace the mundane and the boring as an entire football team to get to where you want to go when the games start to get fun.
We're going to let you hear from a couple of defensive players here in just a second in this draft today. And obviously the Bears at 10, maybe thinking a defensive player. So we're going to hear from Mason Graham from Michigan in a second. But since we're talking about Ben Johnson right now, let's talk a little bit. There is a little bit of news on Matt Eberflus, his predecessor. And specifically, Dan, I know you were excited to talk about this because you are oh, no, I was going to say you were a part of something, but you're not. The NFLPA issued its annual pre-free agents, I think you put it that way, pre-free agency report cards and rankings for all 32 teams. And Dan, help us out here. This entails everything, right? Coach, ownership, facilities, food, the way the players are treated.
I'll give you the list of categories and the grades. Why not? Because we made you grade Ryan Poles a month ago, and so now we're gonna give the actual Bears grades that the players gave for all these things in this NFLPA survey.
Why don't you start with Flus, since I just teased it? Unless you want to really make the Take the North audience wait till the end.
No, that's not what we do. We don't bury the lead here.
That's
not part of it. But anyway, head coaching is part of this. And there was only one category year over year where the Bears got a worse grade in 2024 than they got in 2023. They went from a B in head coach down to a C. C was the lowest grade any head coach got in the NFL from their players in 2024. The Bears came in 32nd in that category. And in the overview of the NFLPA report card of the Bears, this is what it said. It said the players' most frequent complaint was with their former head coach, Matt Eberflus. The players felt like he lacked a willingness to listen to the players and the Players Leadership Council, and he mismanaged the weekly team schedule. After the team completed the survey, the Bears terminated Eberflus and hired Ben Johnson as their new head coach. It will be interesting for the players to see if some of these areas change next year. Along with that, Grote, I visited with the president of the NFLPA, J.C. Tretter, afterwards, and just asked him if he had any more insight into the specifics of what Bears players were complaining about. He said he didn't really have specifics there, but that it's really common when there is a new coach hired somewhere for there to be a bounce in that category the next season. It's no surprise that of the 6 coaches that got A pluses this year, 2 of them were first year head coaches in their respective organizations. It's Dan Quinn and Raheem Morris. And so you would imagine the Bears will not be grading out 32nd or getting a C in the category of head coach next year, because Ben Johnson's going to bring all that new energy we talked about. But I do love this survey, and I'll give you a chance to chime in here in a second. It's the 3rd straight year the NFLPA has done this, and I think it's just a great way to put each team under a microscope and let their players kind of determine what they see, and give feedback anonymously that then allows a football team's, football operations department and ownership to understand, okay, here are the areas where we're meeting standards for our players, and here are the areas where we're falling short. And so it's I think this is a cool idea that they launched a few years ago, and we've seen now over 3 years the progression of that.
It's like, it's amazing, because we could think of examples here. Reading the quote that you read on Flus, the players felt like he lacked the willingness to listen to the players and the Players Leadership Council. It just makes me think about specific incidents during the season, like the Tyreek Stevenson thing, like if they wanted him to be suspended for that game, or to be more consequences during that. And the other thing too, that I'm sure there's other examples too, how did he get a C out of all. I mean, like, that's actually
Yeah.
not bad. Like, all things like, this sounds pretty, like,
Well,
that's a huge indictment, and you got a C? The C's pretty good.
And it is right, like yeah, exactly. The comments in the report card and the grade don't seem like they match up quite like they should.
Yeah, it's like,
Look, C was their lowest grade in any category.
oh, it was. Okay.
And as you know, you and I were handing out D's and D minuses a couple weeks ago on a report card, and so a little bit easier grader these players are. But so here's the 11 categories: treatment of families, C+ for the Bears.
Okay.
Food and the dining area, C+ for the Bears. Nutritionist, dietitian, B. Locker room, A-. Training room, B+. Training staff, B. Weight room, A. Strength coaches, B+. Team travel, B. Head coach, C. Ownership, A-. Interesting, right? Like some interesting things to just chew on a little bit. And you would hope that again, the leadership at Haugh would review this. And that's another thing that JC Treader told me today is that he hopes, he says, look, like, every team and every organization is going to interpret and react to these rankings differently, but he hopes that teams don't get caught up in the ranking, like, oh, you're 14th out of 32 as the Bears are this year, and are more in tune with what the letter grades are and what the players are saying with those letter grades in order to give you some direction on how they want you to improve your operation and the way the player experience can be enhanced. And so we'll see which direction the Bears go. I did just say that the Bears were 14th. That was also dead last in the NFC North because they're three division rivals, the Vikings, the Packers, and the Lions, checked in at 2, 7, and 9 respectively. So that's 3 top 10 groups doing things right for their players.
Yeah, Bears 14th out of 32. They were 10th last year. Yeah, I think it's. I mean, hey, on the positive side, like, and this is not something we would have said pre-addition to Haugh, but the fact that they get an A- for the facilities is huge. I mean, that's a big thing when it comes to free agency and comfort and word of mouth, and players can see that when they talk to Bears players. Obviously, they're going to get a good ranking. Were you at all surprised? And maybe this is why ownership got an A- 13th. We're not used to ownership being treated nicely, Dan. I think, like, obviously this is a players, the NFLPA, not fans, but it is interesting and I guess nice and refreshing to see Bears ownership actually get an A- in something.
I'm trying to find the 3 things that, okay, so this is what players were asked to review ownership on: their willingness to invest in the facilities, their contributions to creating a positive team culture, and their commitment to building a competitive team. So those were the 3 areas that players were asked to grade ownership on. And yeah, right. Like, so there's a little bit of nuance to that and some interpretation for each player to figure that out. But an A- is a pretty good grade for George McCaskey and the ownership team, and they should build on that momentum and use that to their advantage as they push forward in what is widely agreed a very pivotal time for the franchise.
Yeah, big defensive day out here at the NFL Combine today, and the Bears, they could probably use a guy on the interior. They definitely need a defensive end, so Abdul Carter was up there, who is very possible that Abdul Carter out of Penn State could go number 1 overall. So the Bears would probably have to trade up to get him. James Pierce was talking. Everybody was talking on the defensive end side. A defensive lineman that was speaking today, somebody that I'm very interested in, Dan, and I know you are too. Everybody is, and that's Mason Graham out of Michigan, the defensive tackle, who is definitely a guy who is being mock drafted in top 10. I mean, I've seen him. I think the latest I've seen him is like 6, I think, maybe a 7. So with the Bears at 10, again, they'd have to move up or get lucky. But this is a hell of a player right here. This is a 3 technique, man. I mean, this is what you need. This is what you've been looking for, unless they think Gervon Dexter is it. Before I play the audio, I will just ask you straight up, Dan, do you think the Bears need a 3 technique, or do you think that the development of Gervon Dexter is going well?
Dream scenario if Mason Graham were to be on the board when the Bears were picking at 10, because I do think that is the type of player that they would love to add. I think you heard from Ryan Poles on Tuesday talking about adding teeth to the pass rush, but specifically doing so on the interior. I think he used the word, the phrase that we need a guy who can puncture the pocket on a regular basis, and so that's going to come from a guy who understands how to be a major disruptor on the interior of the defensive line. And so, look, it's a deep draft for that position group. If the Bears found that lucked their way into Mason Graham, stranger things have happened. I think they would be ready to celebrate on the Friday of draft weekend. But yeah, I think that's a position that they're going to be heavily invested in trying to upgrade as they try to build this defense into something formidable.
Well, let's take a listen now to Mason Graham, defensive tackle, Michigan.
So what's the most important part about playing 3 technique?
I just feel like, physicality, doing your job every play. Us as D linemen, we're told to do the same thing, playing throughout, maybe like 70 snaps a game. So, doing the same thing over and over again is probably, the hardest part. And I feel like, D linemen, I pride myself on doing that.
Why are you good at it?
I feel like I put in a lot of hard work. I've been coached really well all throughout high school, college. Put in the extra time, put in the extra work, try to perfect and be the best player I could for my teammates.
Do you think you'll still be available at number 10 in the draft?
I don't know. Whenever I get that call, I'll know who I'm going to.
Do you like that, Dan?
I did. I like that. I'm surprised he didn't say, yeah, absolutely.
I'm surprised he didn't say the opposite. Usually these players, so no, man, I'm a top 5 pick. I'm the number 1 pick. Everybody knows I like that. That's been a thing at Abdul Carter, man. He definitely was like, oh yeah, I'm the best player. I should be the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah, right. The swag that needs to come
Swag
out here.
is
I will
real,
tell you
man.
this, I'm hopeful that between now and draft weekend, we get a chance to have Daniel Jeremiah on the pod here and to pick his brain deeper on some of these things. But one of the things that he said last week about Mason Graham is he's a guy that is built for the fall and not for the spring. And I love that because he doesn't think that this is a guy that's going to ace the pre-draft process, right? Like he may not test well. The on-field drills may not look exactly like you want him to look, but when it comes to playing football in games that matter, the dude is a major disruptor. And so that's something from the Bears standpoint that they should be absolutely rooting for. That Mason Graham has himself a bad spring, and just doesn't impress teams throughout this process, but then finds his way to that number 10 slot. And then you go, okay, now we're going to take you to the fall and we're going to see what you can do there, because that seems to be where you do your best work.
Out there.
Yeah, well, I think Bears fans will like to hear too that during that same conversation, somebody brought up some of the critiques of his game, maybe some of what you were just saying right there, like athleticism, and he very much resented that. He was like, I don't know where you're getting that stuff from. I'm not hearing all that. But of course, that's what the player is going to say. But this is not Jalen Carter, but this is a dominant defensive tackle who would be worthy for sure. Just for the heck of it, Dan, I don't think again, unless the Bears move up in the draft, Abdul Carter is not going to come to them at 10. No. But this is people using the word superstar to attach to Abdul Carter's name. Let's listen to a little bit of Abdul Carter just to get a little idea of what the Penn State edge rusher is all about. Here he is.
Yeah, I feel like you definitely need a franchise edge rusher. If you look at all the great teams that won Super Bowls, that you have that one standout great defensive player, and I feel like I'm that. My dad, he trained me to be the best player I can be, and not just being the best on the field, but off the field. And knowing all the work I put in, all the training I did, all the sacrifices I made, I know I'm the best.
Now that you're vying for a top pick alongside other quarterbacks, how do you think your value maybe weighs, against people in that position?
Like I said, defensive players impact the game just as much as a quarterback. And I feel like me, myself, and all the best defensive players in the country need to just start speaking out about that more, because we're just important to the game as the best quarterbacks.
I don't think that the edge rushers are as important yet, Dan, as the quarterbacks, but they're top 3, right? Position-wise.
Oh, no question. Yeah, that's a premium position, and it's an area where you want to get production, and look like that. Look, the Bears paid Montez Sweat to be an every quarter difference maker, and they're going to need to get a return on investment in 2025 on that contract that they gave Montez Sweat. In the meantime, they're going to have to find ways to complement him up front, and whatever that looks like, whether that's an interior pass rusher, whether it's finding somebody that they can develop on the opposite side. Go ahead and do that. For some reason today, I was in a conversation about Austin Booker, and you think about what the Bears thought that they were getting in Austin Booker when they went through the draft last year. Well, now he's going to have to work with a whole new coaching staff who's going to have to determine what kind of potential they see in him. And that's Dennis Allen and his crew getting their hands on him. But the faster you can find reliable pieces across your pass rush to make life difficult on a quarterback, the better it's going to be. Little Easter egg for those who follow me and you really closely and not just via the Take the North podcast. Bears could always wait till day 2 and draft Lance Dixon out of DePaul for their
Lance Dixon, and the 90s DePaul Blue Demons basketball player about whom Dan and I spoke the last time we did the
fictitious.
Live. Yes, it's fictitious. We did some conflating. What was that show about 2 weeks ago on the Score?
Yeah.
If you'd like to listen to 4 hours of Dan and I, mostly Bears talk, by the way.
A lot of it, because there's always a lot to get to with this team.
Oh my God, there's some. Well, and that's an interesting point you brought up too about mentioning Austin Booker. I don't know, Dan, and I haven't seen you. I literally have not seen you in person today because we've been all over this place doing our separate work. But the name Austin Booker came up in my radio hit on the Score, as did Dominique Robinson. I brought those names up because they were asking me about, hey, with some of these draft picks, maybe you take some chances with, 3rd, 5, and 3, 5, and 6. And I'm like, oh man, I don't necessarily want, and I get it. End of the draft, 6 and your 2 7th-round picks. I get it. Those are always going to be, probably developmental. But I don't necessarily want to hear that anymore. You know what I mean? Like, you got, and maybe Austin Booker and Dominique Robinson will develop into fine players. But now it's like you're at a point where you want to see these players blossom and get guys that are a little bit more of a sure thing. And I don't know if Ben Johnson will help to push the Bears in that direction. But that's one thing that I'm kind of tired of when it comes to polls.
I mean, look, you're at a point where you need to compete, and that has to be at the forefront of every decision you make. This is not 2022 anymore. This is compete time, and it's the time to establish yourself as a team that can play in the playoffs. And so every single decision you make with the roster right now has to be with that in mind, and hopefully the Bears can navigate through this next 2-month process in a way that gets them a little bit closer.
Yeah, let's hope so, Dan. Anything else? I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we need to cover here at the old NFL Combine. This is Wednesday as we record it here, middle of the week at the NFL Combine.
Yeah, I wanted to throw this question at you, just, and this will be something we discuss for months, but when it comes to the union between Caleb and Ben, what are you most fascinated by? Because I like, there's a part of me that hears the grand goals that Caleb sets, and we heard him last year when he was drafted talk about winning more than a half dozen Super Bowls, and then you hear Ben Johnson and the focus on the daily grind and the dirty work that has to go into to accomplishing even the smallest things. And I'm just curious how that union is going to work, I guess, out of the gates during a period where it's going to have to be a lot of dirty work and not a lot of glory.
Yeah, see, again, some of this comes down to I don't know, because I don't completely know what resonates yet with Caleb Williams. We're all getting to know Caleb. It's been a year's worth of Caleb Williams. I have an idea of what he's all about, but I just don't know what kind of coaching he responds to or what kind of coaching he doesn't respond to. What I do know is that, look, any new coach that came in here probably would have said nice things about Caleb Williams because that's your quarterback. But with the way I'm reading it with Ben Johnson, because he's been pretty specific in how he has praised Caleb Williams, I think he can't wait to get with Caleb Williams, especially, and I know we talked about this a little bit the other day, but Ben Johnson now twice and maybe more with all the interviews he's been doing is big on being very respectful of Jared Goff, but basically saying, I got a quarterback now. I can do all stuff I could not do in Detroit. And that's going to take a while to get to that point, but I cannot wait to see if he can unlock that.
No question. And I'm also curious how they will set up the system of voices. Obviously Ben is going to be the most important voice for Caleb, but then how does Press Taylor factor in? How does JT Barrett factor in? How does Declan Doyle factor in? And what kind of is the chain of command that they want? Because it was a different setup a year ago with the way the Bears did things. And you remember it was like, you're going to talk with, Shane Waldron and Kerry Joseph. And then when Shane Waldron got fired, it was like Caleb was just meeting Thomas Brown for the first time.
So weird.
Right? And so what's that communication process going to look like for Caleb as he gets his feet on the ground with this new regime? It's going to be really interesting to watch. Another little nugget for you, Grote, that I think you'll appreciate, because we talked about that NFLPA report card. I filed that story, pressed send on it, let the powers that be at the Tribune go ahead and read it, and went to grab lunch in the lobby of the Marriott here. Who was walking through the lobby of the Marriott at the time that I sat down to eat my lunch? None other than Matt Eberflus, who was just put on blast. I said, "Hi, Matt. How you doing?" And he came over, gave me a fist bump, and said, "Hey, how's it going?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's going good. Nice to see
you." Well, I will see you a Matt Eberflus and actually, I don't know if this is raising, but last night I saw a triumvirate of people that'll be very interesting to you. Shane Waldron was out. Roger Goodell was at the establishment I was at, and Vic Fangio. That was, and there were plenty more, but those are the three that I thought that you would enjoy the most.
Where did you see Vic?
It was at the JW Marriott restaurant. I can't think of the name of the
High Velocity or the Italian place. High Velocity.
We went there with our colleague here at the school.
That 100% does not seem like a Vic place to me.
No, it does. Well, actually, what is a Vic place? I'm acting like I know what a Vic place would be.
I would just say lower key, like less people.
I will say that at the time that Chris and I were there, because it was before the big happy hour, it was early, so it was very sparsely populated. But even in that low population, we managed to see those three people. So
I have not seen Vic in a while, and I'd like to run across Vic soon because he deserves some kudos for what he did in Philly.
Doubt. And I kind of saw him like by the door, so and I don't know Vic probably well enough to go up to him and be like, "Hey, Mark Grote, good to see you, buddy," because it was only there, at least in my watch, it was only there for the 1 year that I was there. So
that's what makes this event fun. You just don't know who you're going to run across or where. And I actually ran into someone else I was going down the escalator, he was going up, so it was a really rushed, like, "Hey, great to see you all." Like, you can't just stop on the escalator, you know.
I know.
Neither one of us was going to get on the other side escalator, and so you're like, "Oh, man,
it's so
I'll
funny
run across you again."
Well, another thing too here at the Combine that's funny is like we talked to. I mean, I know we have guests here on the podcast, but like on the Score, we have guests on. We have beat writers from around the country, and now I get a chance to put a name with a face with some of the people that we talk to all the time.
Sure.
"Hey, are you so and so? Oh yeah, good to see you. You know, nice to meet you in person." So it's like a reunion of NFL-ness for everybody.
It is. What do you got on tap? Like, we're getting out of here, I think, tomorrow. I am tomorrow, and you're getting out. Like, what's left? What's left for you? You got a dinner lined up? What do you got?
No, as we are recording this podcast, I have a Score appearance that I'm doing. I'm going to do a Score hit. And then, Dan, I'm out of here.
You're out tonight.
Wednesday. I'm leaving early. I've got some personal business to attend to on Thursday and Friday. So normally I would be here through Friday. Unfortunately, I'm going to use the word. I'm going to skedaddle here on this Wednesday. What about you? Will you be staying here, picking up the slack for everybody, or what?
Yeah, through tomorrow, and tonight will be the St. Elmo's dinner. So that'll be good with some of the crew. Still kind of use that here at the Combine. That used to be organized by our good buddy Jeff Dickerson. So we still kind of do that in tribute there, and then we'll see what tomorrow brings. It's been fun to kind of wander around. I will tell you this. I told you yesterday how old I was feeling. Brought my own pillow here. I think I have been in bed at or before midnight the first 2 nights here. I can't promise that here for tonight, but I've been pretty proud of the ability to rein it in, like have my fun and still be able to get to bed at before curfew kicks in.
Have you had a nap yet?
Yesterday afternoon, it was like 40 minutes. It wasn't long enough, but it was like really good.
That's meaningful. That's meaningful. I've not
those ones where you're like, okay, I absolutely needed that, quarter tank of gas to get through the remainder of the night. I told you yesterday I had that 9 p.m. dinner reservation last night. Like that was insane.
Ridiculous.
And
that was
ridiculous. I survived that in part because of that 40-minute nap.
You are a crazy person, but
the craziest.
But better you than me, man. Yeah, that's way too late to be having dinner reservations. But hey, man, things are different, and we don't have the comforts of home when we are here in Indianapolis. But it's great. It's awesome out here at the NFL Combine, where we are broadcasting from right now. And I do believe that is it, unless there's anything else here. I know there's millions of things, but
I got to get you on the road. We've got our audience walking with caution through the next 6 months. I need you to drive with caution up I-65.
I will, brother. That is Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune. The producer of this here show is Adam Studzinski, who is back in Chicago. I am Mark Grote out here at the NFL Combine. Thank you all for listening to and watching the Take the North podcast.
Great talk. See you out there.